Thank you very much. And yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to learn more about one of my favorite destinations in the world. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I always like to start by reflecting on what Silversea stands for, our vision and our mission. And the team and I, every single day, go to work really reflecting on how can we support the company's vision. And our vision is really simple. It's that nothing stands between you and the authentic beauty of the world. And you know, for a cruise line, that is absolutely spectacular, because at the end of the day, we use our ships as the platforms to take our guests to some of the most remarkable destinations on the planet. And we explore together, unlocking these wonderful destinations in luxury. We have currently 5 expedition ships operating around the world, but I am really excited about the 3 ships that we have visiting Antarctica. We have been visiting Antarctica for just over 16 years now, and in my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined that one day when we started with Silversea Expeditions, the first ultra-luxury company to offer expeditions to Antarctica, that we would have the opportunity to take guests to Antarctica on our beautiful Silver Cloud, Silver Wind, and our new ship, the Silver Endeavour. Absolutely spectacular. And I always get goosebumps when I look at this image that was sent to us by our captains, and with the Silver Endeavour proudly in the middle. I think the captain felt a little bit like, I need to push the 2 baby sisters out of the way. As I said, we have 5 expedition ships. We have got Silver Cloud, Silver Wind. Of course, these are the ships that started the Silversea story back in the 1990s. We've converted these ships to expedition vessels, and they are proudly sailing the Silversea Expedition flag around the world. We have got the Silver Endeavour, which is our brand new expedition ship, one of the most luxurious vessels ever built. And of course, we have got Silver Explorer, and then our beautiful baby in the Galapagos operating 7-day voyages. But today we are really here to talk a little bit more about our expedition offering in Antarctica. You know, we consider ourselves as innovators in the luxury expedition segment, and every single one of our expeditions, whether it's Antarctica or anywhere we operate in the world, we have got 5 key pillars that we base our expeditions on. We focus very heavily on education and enrichment. So our voyages are not about, our expedition voyages are not about entertainment. Of course, we do have entertainment on board, a cocktail pianist, you know, some background music, but the focus truly is on the educational element. And therefore, we have got an incredibly skilled and qualified expedition team, and a large expedition team that travel with us on our ships. And depending on the vessel, it's anywhere between 22 and 30 expedition staff that will accompany you. And they will be specialists that will really bring the destination alive, not only in the field, guiding our experiences, but also on board through recaps and briefings and lectures. These individuals are really passionate not only about expedition cruising, but also about the destination. We always consider the activity levels, and you know, many people think, especially considering that we are speaking about Antarctica today, many people will consider Antarctica as one of those destinations that you have to be in top shape and you have to be basically a mountain climber to be able to go to Antarctica. And in fact, the reality is that Antarctica is one of the easiest destinations that we offer in terms of expedition. And we have different levels of activity that we offer for our guests, whether it's a Zodiac cruises, whether it's short hikes, medium hikes, longer hikes, kayaking, or just enjoying it from the deck with some bird watching or scenery watching from the deck with the expedition staff. Of course, the scenery is a super important part of what we do, but we do visit some of the most beautiful parts of the world. In Antarctica, really the scenery, as we will see later on in the presentation, is absolutely all around us. We focus very heavily on culture and history, and in Antarctica, of course, we learn all about the magnificent and sometimes interesting expeditions of exploration that has taken part in Antarctica, and also a little bit more about the the modern day exploration of Antarctica, and also how we can affect change in Antarctica. And then, of course, the wildlife is absolutely all around us, and it's a key pillar for us in developing and executing our expeditions. We take expedition delivery extremely serious at Silversea. We've been a pioneer in so many fronts. We were the first ultra luxury company that offered expedition cruising, and we were groundbreakers in many of the destinations around the world that we offered first time access through expeditions. We continuously look at ways to be better. We continuously look at ways to increase our knowledge, whether it is our classic or our expedition fleet. We've got a very robust research and development program at Silversea, spending a lot of resources and manpower in developing our destinations. And it was that in mind that we actually conducted the first ever scouting trip of Antarctica. So we chartered a research and a supply vessel back in January this year, and we sent a team of expedition leaders and captains down to Antarctica to increase our knowledge base on the destination, to understand if there are other areas of the Antarctic Peninsula, the region that we generally visit, if there are other areas that we can visit, and that we can increase the amount of visitor sites that are available to Antarctic tour operators as a whole. As a matter of interest, the Antarctic Treaty has identified just over 300 or so sites that tourists are allowed to visit in Antarctica. Of those, as a member of IATA, we only visit the sites that have certified site guidelines written that dictate how we operate once we are ashore. So we actually conducted this mission visiting over 50 sites, and in the end we came back with 22 site guidelines that we will share with the broader Antarctic community. You know, and I always, when we do conduct these scouting missions, when we do prepare for these polar expeditions, I always have the words of my absolutely favorite, my personal hero, Roald Amundsen. I always have these famous words in mind that said, "Victory awaits him who has everything in order. Luck, we call it, and defeat definitely is due for him who has neglected to take the necessary precautions. Bad luck, we call it." And we just simply don't believe in luck or bad luck here at Silversea. We believe that we are successful because we take the necessary precautions. We study the destinations, and we make sure that we have the tools and the knowledge to truly deliver these destinations and live up to the expectations of our guests. And we do it in a safe and responsible manner. This was a very exciting scouting mission for us. And during the trip, the team that went down there, they sailed nearly 3,000 miles, 2,700 nautical miles. We had 2 helicopters that did aerial surveys for us. And in the end, we validated 22 new landing sites. And as I mentioned before, we will be sharing this with the broader Antarctic community and therefore playing our part in sustainable and environmentally friendly travel in Antarctica. Silversea has 3 distinct different products that we offer our guests to the opportunity to participate in. We have got our longer voyages, 15 and 18-night voyages, that includes the destinations like the Falklands and South Georgia, of course, the Antarctic Peninsula. We also have our voyages that go from Puerto Williams down to Antarctica via the Drake Passage, those 10 and 12-night sailings. And then we also have our very unique Antarctica Bridge or fly cruise opportunity where you fly into Antarctica, and those are 6 and 15-night sailings. Our guest journey is very simple. We really have taken a lot of time to reflect on the journey. And from Santiago, you fly down on a charter flight to Puerto Williams and you join the ship. Or if it is a fly cruise voyage from Santiago, you take a charter flight that we take care of to Punta Arenas. You have 1 night in Punta Arenas, and then you take another 1.5-hour flight down to Antarctica and you join the ship there. We've spent a lot of time, as I mentioned, thinking about the journey to Antarctica, and for that, we have changed the way we operate, and we have an agreement with Antarctic Airways, and they operate all our charter flights. And this is in a business-like comfort. We've got 35-inch pitch. We've got in-flight entertainment that we've developed specifically for our Silver Sea guests. We've got upgraded catering, local Chilean food and wine. So it's really an upgraded experience, true to our brand, experiencing the destinations in luxury. But really, it is I could not agree more with that. I think all of us here today are travelers and are curious travelers. And that's why we consider traveling to places like the Falklands, which is absolutely a spectacular part of the world. We spent 2 full days exploring the Falklands, the beautiful beaches. These are white, beautiful, wildlife-rich beaches with a ton of history and a ton of wildlife for our guests to explore together with our expedition team. I love the fact that in the Falklands, right off the bat, once we leave Port Williams, it's a day at sea, we get into the Falklands, and you're in true expeditionary mode. We get to see the amazing rockhopper penguins, large colonies with tens of thousands of these birds. We get to see the black-browed albatrosses. So once we start crossing over from South America to the islands, we'll have a huge group of birds following the ship, and we'll get very close to this albatross once we get ashore on places like New Island, West Point Island, blue-eyed shags, dolphins porpoising in the water, following our zodiacs as we come closer to the shore, and also being around the ship all the time. We dedicate 1 full day to explore the capital of the Falklands, Stanley. And this is the last time that we will have any interaction with any kind of human settlement on our voyages. But it is an important stop. And of course, these are the itineraries that go Falklands, South Georgia, and Antarctic Peninsula. But it is an important stop for us to remind ourselves on the history, and also a wonderful opportunity to engage with the local communities and see how they live in this remote part of the world. It is quite an interesting destination, and we also offer a variety of hikes and kayaking, zodiac cruises for those guests that want to continue exploring the Falklands natural history. From the Falklands, we've got 2 full days at sea as we make our way over to South Georgia. And those days are full of lectures, getting ready for South Georgia, learning about the history, learning about the wildlife, and truly, spending time out on deck with the expedition staff, looking for the wildlife. And we will get to encounter many whale species on our way to South Georgia, where, between the wildlife and the history and the scenery, it is one of the most spectacular parts of the world. Of course, there is a very sad history of whaling. There we will see a couple of the whaling stations, or the remnants of whaling stations. Thankfully, whaling to a large degree has ceased, and these whaling stations no longer operate. And since then, we have seen a rebound in some of the whale populations in some areas in the world, thankfully. But it is still an important reminder of what we have done wrong in the past. We can learn from our past to go into the future. And so we learn about the history, and many of the explorers left from South Georgia when they went down to Antarctica. And so it's a great opportunity to learn about Shackleton and Scott and some of these incredible explorers from the Great Heroic Age. But it's not only about the explorers, it's also about the wildlife. And in no place on earth will you see wildlife in such wonderful numbers. Seeing the incredible wandering albatross. These birds are so phenomenal. They are born, they hatch on the island. For instance, this island is Pryan Island. They are hatched there. They take 2 years to reach full maturity. Then they'll go out at sea for 7 years, and they'll spend 7 years at sea before they return to exactly the same spot where they were born. They will then mate. They'll mate for life. As long as the partner returns to the same island, they will continue their bond for life. These incredible birds have got a wingspan of 15 feet. It is absolutely phenomenal to see them up close. You cannot actually appreciate from this photo the sheer size of these animals. You'll go onto places like Salisbury Plain, St. Andrews Bay, where hundreds of thousands of king penguins are all around you. And there are rules and regulations that, say that we can't get closer than a certain distance from the animals, and of course we keep our distance, but the animals don't know that rules. So quite often, if you stand still, you see the animals come very close to you, because you are at one with nature in this part of the world. The wildlife in South Georgia is absolutely spectacular and is all around you. The scenery is breathtaking. Now, it's interesting that depending on the time of the year that you go, you will either see a lot of snow and ice on the mountains, and later on in the season, it's more reminiscent of some other parts of the world with incredible peaks and mountains. But, it is still a very remote South Atlantic island, and we are still in the sub-Antarctics. Lots of zodiac opportunities, and again, just returning to the wildlife, and these elephant seals are my absolute favorite in South Georgia. Fighting and, really defending their territory, just like a bunch of teenagers fighting over a girlfriend, I imagine. But it is really spectacular. We spent 3 days in South Georgia before we then turned the vessel and head south towards Antarctica. And that's when we really get to, for many of our guests, their last continent to visit of the 7 continents. And I'm always reminded of Andrew Denton when he said, if Antarctica were music, it would be Mozart. Art, and it would be Michelangelo. Literature, and it would be Shakespeare. And yet it is something even greater. The only place on earth that is still as it should be. And it's really hard to truly understand those words until you've actually been to Antarctica. I've been extremely fortunate in my career over the past 20 odd years that I've done 80 expeditions to Antarctica, and every single one of these expeditions were different, and it's truly an emotional journey. And so often you speak to people on these expeditions at the beginning, understanding their expectations, and at the end reflecting on what they've experienced, and it's completely different. And even husband and wife or partners traveling together quite often have had a different emotional reaction to Antarctica, because it is different. It is an emotional journey that is very hard to explain. It is those feelings that you have standing on the deck of our ships as we push gently through the ice. It's those feelings that you have when you get on the Zodiac for the first time, and you see the incredible colors that you will find, and the shapes and the forms in the icebergs. It is that first time that you see penguins on an ice floe, leopard seals, lying waiting just for that perfect opportunity to slide into the water and, go hunt for penguins. It is that moment when you just stand outside, out on the deck late in the evening, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and the sun just sets, and you've got these beautiful colors in the sky. When you reflect on the words of Robert Falcon Scott, these are the words that was in his diary as he was on his way to the South Pole. And Scott wrote, "I'd pause to listen to the silence. My breath crystallized as it passed my cheeks, drifted on a breeze gentler than a whisper. The wind vane pointed toward the South Pole. Presently, the wind cups ceased their gentle turning as the cold killed the breeze. My frozen breath hung like a cloud overhead. The day was dying, the night was being born, but with great peace. Here were the imponderable processes and forces of the cosmos, harmonious and soundless." And it is so incredible when you reflect on these words, when you stand outside on deck after a beautiful evening of beautiful food and service, and you are just with your own thoughts out on deck, and you experience the silence of Antarctica, when you experience something that very few people in the world ever have the privilege to experience. It's so wonderful to think that out of 7 billion people on our planet, less than 100,000 people a year actually get to experience the remarkable site that is Antarctica. That so few people have the opportunity to sit on the Zodiac with our experts and have gentoo penguins porpoising right next to the boat. So few people have the opportunity. One of my most fond memories of Antarctica is a few years ago when we were doing a Zodiac cruise, and the wildlife is truly all around us. And we were doing a Zodiac cruise, and we were spotting a group of humpback whales in the distance. And slowly we made our way, of course, following all the regulations possibly, and with great regard to the wildlife. We were slowly making our way across the bay, Nico Harbor, towards the whales. And at one point, we switched our engines off, and we could hear the whale blows. And it's just an overwhelming silence, and you could hear the whale blows very distinct. You could see the puff, and we knew it was a group of humpback whales. And we were very content just sitting there enjoying the silence, and we were very content just listening and experiencing this from a distance. And we soon realized that the whales were coming closer and closer to us. And we realized that closer to us was a mother and her calf. And it was one of the most unique experiences I can ever imagine. And this whale mother and her calf kept on swimming under our Zodiac, coming up, spy hopping right next to the boat. You can see it here on this photo. And at one stage, it was almost like she was pushing her calf up towards the Zodiac, saying, "Hey, look at the humans." And this was an interaction with a 45-ton animal, and we were just at one with nature. We were just part of Antarctica. We were not humans dominating. We were not humans trying to change anything. We were just there experiencing. And for me, that is a big part of Antarctica and the journey in Antarctica, is the fact that we are observers, we are participants of in the short summer month cycle of life that happens in Antarctica. We do not interfere. We are, as I said, observers. We see when the leopard seals go out and hunt for penguins. That is life. And our guests are exposed to this. We see the cycle. We see the chicks. We see the antics of the chicks when they are in Antarctica, and I mean, who doesn't love a few fluffy, cuddly, and gentoo penguins? We learn about, as I previously mentioned, the history of exploration and at one stage exploitation of the resources of Antarctica, and how we have to preserve this for future generations, and the parts and the roles that we can play. We also allow people that are a little bit crazy to jump in the freezing cold waters of Antarctica. I truly don't understand it. However, the polar plunge is something that is very, very popular. And I guess it is quite thrilling. I've done it once in my life, and that was enough. But I guess it is quite thrilling to jump in 0 degrees water. I have to state very transparently that I did not find it thrilling. I do, however, find it quite entertaining to watch all our guests try this. And I suppose it is one of those incredible experiences that everybody should at least do once in their life. We have a great team of kayak experts on our vessels, on all our expedition ships. And so if for our guests that want to get a little bit more adventurous, we offer, whenever the weather allows, we offer these wonderful kayak explorations. But it is all about the activity, and we try as an expedition company to get our guests off the ship as often and as many times as possible. On average, we do 2 landings a day in Antarctica, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And because we have got such a large fleet of zodiacs on our ships, and we have a large expedition staff, quite often we can combine the experiences. We can have a group of our guests shoreside, while another part of our guests are on a zodiac cruise, and another part of our guests are on kayaks, therefore extending the time that our guests have shoreside to the maximum. It is quite rewarding to be ashore with our expedition staff. As I mentioned before, they are incredibly passionate, incredibly knowledgeable. We have experts in ornithology, we've got experts in marine biology, glaciology, geology, of course. We have got experts in exploration with us. We've got general naturalists, and it is very rewarding to go on a hike with the staff that are such a big part of your experience, both shoreside on the Zodiacs and also on board the ship. Our staff dine with our guests to continue to share their knowledge. Our expedition staff drive Zodiacs. You will always have the knowledgeable staff with you, whether it is on a transfer from the ship to the landing site, whether it's on a hike, whether it's out on deck, or for those of our guests that choose to also to dine with the expedition staff. It really is quite spectacular, and it is, ladies and gentlemen, not the most difficult thing in the world. The beauty of Antarctica is that you can spend time out on deck and just have the beauty of Antarctica surround you. You can see it in this image where our silver wind is at anchor in the distance. And you can imagine sitting out on deck and have this incredible scenery around you, perhaps with a glass of champagne, perhaps enjoying the hot tub out on deck, perhaps going for a swim on the pool of silver cloud or silver wind, the heated pool, while you are in Antarctica. Going ashore is easy. Some of the landing sites are a little bit more tricky, but even then, you can just stay at the landing site or go on a Zodiac tour. It really is the easiest thing in the world. And our teams on board the ship really are quite skilled at getting our guests onto the Zodiacs and ashore. Ladies and gentlemen, for me, I always think of once again, I go back to Shackleton and I think of his quote before when he advertised for people to join him on his fateful and most famous expedition, when he said, "Men wanted for hazardous journey." Are able to afford our guests. There's no doubt in my mind that Shackleton and the explorers had very good food. They actually did spend a lot of time on provisioning, at least for the first part of their expeditions. Quite often, when these things went wrong, of course, then the food choices, the menu choices became limited. But it is when you have these words in mind and you understand what these explorers had to endure, you will find yourself standing in Antarctica at one stage during the journey and reflect on this and understand that the Antarctica that you are looking at is the exact same Antarctica that Shackleton, Scott, and Amundsen, Bellinghausen, Gerlach, any of these explorers from the heroic age saw and experienced. trained to the maximum in order to cater to our guests' needs, to make sure that we operate safely. And with that in mind, we run training sessions throughout the year, both online and in practice. We spend a lot of resources to take our teams ahead of both our Arctic, Kimberley, and South Antarctica seasons to South America, and spend time going through basic safety training, crevasse training, making sure that we've got the very best captains, skilled captains, navigators, and the very best expedition staff that will take us to Antarctica. And it's when you have this level of confidence and preparation, going back thinking about Roald Amundsen's word, is when you have done all the preparations, you are able to truly pull off these amazing expeditions. And you are able to, with confidence, rely on your expedition team to get our guests ashore safely. You can see here, I love this image. I was on Silver Endeavour with our expedition team, and I was so proud looking at them, seeing how thoughtfully they executed this particular landing site down south, way below the Antarctic Circle. And we were going around the island, and they were scouting for a landing site, and they determined that the beach that we would normally land at was too rough that day. The surf was too much. And our very, very competent and incredibly skilled expedition leader, Marika, that was on duty at that moment, she made the decision to go around the island, continue to explore for opportunities to get our guests ashore. And she found a place in a very, secluded little bay where it was flat, calm, but a lot of ice. And the ice would have prevented us from getting ashore. But because we knew the conditions, because our teams are trained, because our teams are so skilled, and they are so passionate about getting our guests ashore, the teams in turn spent the next few hours standing waist deep in the water, pushing the ice out of the way and allowing the Zodiacs to come in, and we were able to take our guests ashore in this amazing destination. So what I'm trying to say is that we spend a lot of time preparing, selecting our expedition staff, making sure that we have the very best people to deliver the very best expedition. And the fact that we're Silver Sea makes it even so more special. I think what is super important to remember is that we are not a luxury cruise line trying to deliver expeditions. We are first and foremost a destination company, an expedition company that take our guests to these destinations on luxury ships. And for those guests that have decided that they would love to see Antarctica, but maybe they don't want to cross the Drake Passage, or maybe they don't have 10 or 15 or 18 days, we do have the Drake Passage fly cruise opportunity. When I say the Drake Passage fly cruise, it means we fly across the Drake Passage. As I mentioned earlier, I've done 80 voyages, expeditions to Antarctica, and it was on expedition number 78 that I went down there, and I got on a plane and from Punta Arenas, and I flew down to Antarctica. And it was amazing to get on a plane in Punta Arenas and 1 hour and 45 minutes later get off a plane in Antarctica. And at that stage, I had to question myself why I've crossed the Drake Passage over 150 times, because it is quite remarkable to fly, especially in business class comfort, to Antarctica. There is something very special about flying across the Drake Passage and then coming in for landing at King George Island with these incredibly versatile aircraft, the BAE 146s, 4-engine aircraft. And you come in and you see your Silver Endeavour waiting for you, your home, your base camp in Antarctica, landing on this gravel runway, and then pulling up to what we call Base Charlie, which is the apron or the gravel area where the planes park. And then from there, the Silver Sea buses pick our guests up. We take you down to the landing site. You're already dressed in your parka, your waterproof pants, your boots, because we've given that to you already the night before in Punta Arenas. And you get on the Zodiacs, and within a few minutes, you are on board your luxury base camp, and then explore Antarctica for 6 days before flying back to Punta Arenas. I've traveled. I've had the fortunate experience to travel with this beautiful young man a few times, probably because he's my son. And Luke has been with me on a few expeditions, and he's been very fortunate to travel to Antarctica. He's been a few times, and for me, travel has changed my life. And travel, as we think back on Shackleton's words, is something that is, there's something so human in our desire to travel and explore. And so I'm always reminded of the responsibility that we have when we travel to these unique destinations, or in fact, any destination around the world, to preserve and to be respectful of the environment, respectful of the cultures that we visit. And Antarctica especially is unique because it does survive in its purest form. And Antarctica should survive in its purest form. I reflect back on the words of Richard Beard. It said, "I'm hopeful that Antarctica, in its symbolic robe of white, will shine forth as a continent of peace, as nations working together there in the course of science set an example of international cooperation." And there is few places on Earth that I can think of like Antarctica. In fact, there is no place on Earth that the cooperation between nations is so unique and so in such a way that people and nations depend on each other there for survival, for the success of their missions. It is our responsibility to make sure that our guests become ambassadors for this continent. We feel very passionately about that. We feel passionately about educating our guests, our crew, our staff, to make sure that when they come back, they tell the story of Antarctica. They tell the story of the scientific research, the work, and nations collaborating, and they tell the story of preservation. Because if we don't expose people to Antarctica, take people to Antarctica to experience it, most people will not be able to come back and be ambassadors for it. And there's a very real chance that Antarctica, as we know today, in the future, will not be protected if we don't keep the pressure on our various governments around the world to protect it. And I hope that when my son Luke takes his son or his daughter one day to Antarctica, that they will be able to experience Antarctica like we are able to experience it today. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I can only hope that we will have the opportunity to welcome you on one of our expedition ships to share the beauty of Antarctica with you one day soon. And hopefully we will be able to welcome you on board Silver Endeavour, Silver Cloud, or Silver